welcome to another episode of I Am Maria podcast, a space where we explore the impact stories that inspire us to be who we are today, showing us how our personal decisions and tools shape our lives. Today's guest is someone who breaks the mold, Kamlani. I first met Ashwin at the QSR Evolution Conference last year, 2024, and I was drawn to his energy, his thoughtful insights on the business and leadership, but especially Ashwin, your support in the Women Forum, in the Women in Restaurant Leadership. Ashwin, you are a founder, a CEO of multiple adventures that we'll get into those. Cutting edge AI agents, companies helping restaurants and hotels thrive through profitability, focus, innovation. But beyond your impressive resume, Ashwin, because I have to go into LinkedIn and like dive into everything you have done, what really captivated me is your personal journey. So for the audience, let's imagine this. Ashwin, his daughter, and a pink unicorn van traveling across the US, but not just for fun, but to create meaningful memories. Getting to know each other as individual, as a professional, as a father and daughter. So in this episode, we'll talk about that blend, that visionary entrepreneur who also makes a space for connection, for humanity, and for language. Because yes, Ashwin also has a deep love for Spanish. So let's dive in. Ashwin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Ashwin, the first question so that we really get to know you is who is Ashwin?
Wow. I'm still trying to figure that out. My 50th birthday is coming up in February, so it feels like a big milestone. And honestly, I'm learning more and more every day about myself and the way I view the world and what's important to me, and what I want the future to look like. So, um, I can certainly go back into history and tell you everything that has happened along the way. And in university, I studied psychology and Spanish. Those were my two majors. So I put a lot of thought into my previous experiences and how those have formed the person that I am today. I think I have a pretty good idea of how all of it happened. Of course, again, you're learning more and more every day, right? So, in fact, not to get too deep, but one of the things I've been thinking a lot about lately is how we see ourselves. And when we look in the mirror, the person we see, or when we are at a conference, or when we're out to dinner with people, the people that we think is sitting in front of those people may not actually be the person that those people are perceiving, right? So just this, potential variance or discrepancy between the way we see ourselves and who we think we are versus the way other people perceive us and who they think we are. And I think quite often uh, that difference explains a lot of the things we experience in life. So, you're having a conversation with someone and they react a completely different way than what you expected, and you walk away from the conversation thinking like, wait, how did that happen? Or, why did that person react that way? I was being very open, I was being very nice about it, but you just never really know, right, what the other person thinks or what they think of you. And so anyway, that's something I've been kind of thinking a lot about lately. Anyway.
That is very deep because it's totally true. It's perception.
That's right.
Ashwin, let's dive deep into your story.
Okay.
And we can talk about many decisions in your life, but let's try to stay into 1 to 3 important decisions that have led you to live the life that you have and the person that you are today?
Okay. Um, well, some of these decisions I feel I didn't really pursue the decisions. It was obvious that they had to make those decisions. Um, I'll start way back. I grew up in Miami, Florida, and I lived there until I was 10 years old, and I loved Miami. And then when I was 10 years old, it was 1986, and my parents had made the decision to move up to New York. And so we moved to Long Island. And this was a big culture shock for me. We moved to a town called Great Neck, and I didn't really feel like I fit in with the crowd in Great Neck versus Miami, which was very international and didn't kind of matter your skin color or your background. I felt like in Great Neck, New York, it did. It really mattered. And as a 10-year-old, this was like shocking to me. And so honestly, I had a pretty difficult time 10, 10 years old through the age of 16 or 17, understanding kind of what we just talked about, why people were reacting to me a certain way, or why I was being treated a certain way, or being spoken to a certain way. Um, and as a teenager, you internalize a lot of that. You think it's you, right? You think it's your fault that certain things are happening that may be perceived as negative. And so I had a pretty difficult time with that. And then one of the ways I dealt with it in school was to throw myself into as many activities as I could. So outside of school, I was one of the editors of the yearbook. I was treasurer of the school. I played in the orchestra. I was captain of the swim team. I was on the diving team. I was president of Model Congress, and I liked debate. And I did all these different things. Now, one of the things that I did to keep myself busy was I got involved with this club called Interact, which is the high school division of Rotary International. Are you familiar with Rotary International? Okay, so there's a global organization called Rotary International, and it is all about community service and giving back. There are others like the Lions Club, and basically in almost every town or city you go to, there's a Rotary Club there. And so I became the president of Interact, which was the high school division of Rotary International. And as the president, I was allowed to attend some of the Rotary meetings in Great Neck. And at one of the meetings, I learned that Rotary International has an exchange program all over the world. And so I decided, hey, I really want to apply for that. My parents were nice enough to allow me to apply. And I said I wanted to go to Spain. And I was chosen to participate in this program. And the way it works is you go over the summer. This was between my junior year and senior year of high school. And I told them I wanted to go to Spain. And so they assigned me to a family in La Laguna, Tenerife, in the Islas Canarias. So in the Canary Islands, in the north of Tenerife, I was going to stay with a family where the father was a member of Rotary. They had four children. They only spoke Spanish, so I was put into a situation where I couldn't possibly use my English. I was forced to learn Spanish, which was a blessing for me. Now, here's the thing. I was in this difficult kind of social and emotional situation in high school, but suddenly I was living in this paradise with this really great family. They all thought I was like the coolest guy ever because I lived in New York and they lived in this little island off the coast of Spain. And I got to meet this family and all their friends. And suddenly I found myself waking up, getting together with all these friends, going to the beach, spending the day there, coming back, taking a nap, eating this amazing lunch, then going out, then going clubbing till 2 in the morning. It was the Spanish life, right? But I was 16. And so it just woke me up. And I realized, wait a minute, it's not me that's the problem, actually, back in high school and back in Great Neck. That's this bubble, this kind of toxic bubble that I've been living in for the last 6 years, and I allowed it to kind of beat me down. But this is proof that there's this whole world of amazing people and experiences and languages and cultures out there, and it became my mission to experience more and more of that. So that was the first decision where I was not going to let anything get in my way to have more of that experience that I had that summer between my 11th grade and 12th grade year. And that set off a chain reaction of decisions and events after that.
Wow, that's beautiful. Can you talk about one more decision?
Sure. Well, I think all of this kind of ties together. I mean, when I went to university, I knew from that last experience that I wanted to study abroad, and so I applied in my junior year to go study in Sevilla for 6 months, which was absolutely an amazing decision. And I made these really close friends there, and together we purposely chose our classes to be Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. So every Wednesday evening we would get together, and we didn't have any cell phones or smartphones back then, so we would pull out the map and basically pick another place in Spain we wanted to go visit. And we would just get on the train, and every weekend we would go explore a different place in Spain. And so um, by the end of the 6 months that we were there, the family I was living with said to me, you've been here 6 months, but you know Spain better than we do. And it made me realize, you know what though, but if you were to come to the US and travel around, you would know it better than I do. So I went back to university and talked to a friend and said, hey, why don't we get in a Jeep after we graduate and let's drive all around the US for, as long as we want and go explore the whole country. And we did that. We drove more than 11,000 miles, and I saw all the United States, which was kind of, I probably laid the foundation for the RV trip that I did with my daughter. Um, but anyway, that was another good decision. And then, when I graduated from university, I went straight into technology consulting. And it's a bit of a long story how all that happened because I had no tech background. But let's just say I was able to get into Accenture, which was, a top tech consulting firm in New York. And then I went to PricewaterhouseCoopers. But another key decision for me was that during these 3 years of consulting in New York, I realized I wasn't really passionate about the work I was doing. And I realized that that was because I was in all these different verticals, pharmaceuticals, electronics, finance, banking, but I didn't really care about that. So I was put on a technology project at Eastman Kodak to implement this complicated system that would be able to report on their business. So, how much 200 speed film did you sell in Japan last month? Well, they didn't know that at the corporate level, and this SAP data warehouse would be allow them to pull all these reports. And I remember doing this work and thinking, I just don't care how much 200 speed film Kodak sold in Japan last month. I just don't care. So I thought, well, what would I care about? And the truth is that all through my life, even from when I was very young, I loved the hotel industry. And even I remember as a child, we would go on these long road trips as a family. And my favorite moment was when we would pull off the road. And even if we were just checking into a Days Inn, roadside motel, that was the highlight for me. I don't know why I loved being in a hotel. And if it was even when we went to Disney, right, which was a big kind of family occasion, I loved the hotel. I loved ordering room service, and I don't know, it was like a thrill for me. So when I was consulting and I would go stay in these hotels, I remember walking in the hotel and thinking to myself, if this was my hotel, I could do that and I would do this differently and they should do that differently. And so I applied to the Cornell University master's program, another great decision. I got in. Um, September 11th, 2001 happened the first week of my program. But another very good decision of mine was I'm going to go pursue a career with Melia Hotels and Resorts because I knew this was the largest Spanish hotel chain in the world. I knew they had offices in Miami, where I was originally from. I knew they were based in Mallorca, which is a paradise on earth. Remind me of, a bit about Tenerife. I saw their portfolio of resorts and hotels was amazing, and I thought, that is my dream job. I'm going to go work for that company. And so I could talk here for hours about the path that led me there, but it was just a lot of persistence, and I eventually finished Cornell and had a job lined up as the director of e-commerce for the Americas, and I loved it. We had amazing success there, and I was eventually promoted to run e-commerce, loyalty, revenue management, and all those things globally in Mallorca, which was a dream come true. And at that point is kind of when I started my entrepreneurial life in 2010.
Wow, 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 wow. Like I could speak for hours with
Me
you.
too.
Like this is amazing. I want to ask you about your toolbox because this is something that, oh my God, it has to be so interesting.
So when you say my toolbox, are you referring to kind of like the skills that I've been applying throughout this journey?
Right. How do you make it happen? So what has been on your toolbox that have accompanied you and that continues to be with you? So this is maybe resources, techniques, habits that you implement to stay focused and to move forward.
I think the number one thing is to remain open-minded to any potential opportunity. As insignificant as somebody writes to you or calls you and asks you to meet for coffee, that decision of whether you want to go or not can change your entire life. And I have personal experiences of that. Um, when I first got to Mallorca to work with Melia at at the global level, I worked there for about a year, and my parents were opening a restaurant in Miami. And at the opening party, my dad met this gentleman. He was an older British gentleman, and he happened to mention that he was going to Mallorca. And so my dad said, "Oh, my son has been there. You know, when you go there, you should meet him." So I get this call from this gentleman, and he says, "Hey, I met your father in Miami, and I'm here. You know, do you want to meet for coffee?" And I remember thinking to myself, "Do I? You know, I mean, I don't know this guy. I don't know what he wants, and I'm in Mallorca. I have better things to do. Maybe I should just not go." But I thought, okay, I'm gonna go. Whatever. And so I went and I meet this guy for coffee, and it turns out that he's this music producer, and he was in Mallorca to rent the Bullfight Stadium for a Lenny Kravitz concert. And he's very well connected. He knows all the rich and famous people in Mallorca. And so while we're having coffee, he says, "Hey, you know, if you don't have any plans this weekend, why don't you just come hang out with me? I'll take you around and, introduce you to people." And I was like, "Yes." And he says, "By the way, in February, I'm putting on this music festival in Morocco, in this abandoned old ruins of a palace. And all these famous DJs are going to be there, and all these people that you're going to meet this weekend are flying in their private jets. You should come, be our guest." And I was like, it's just incredible. Imagine if I had said, "Nah, I don't feel like going to meet this guy for coffee." I mean, so every time one of those opportunities is in front of you and you don't take it, you just have no idea what doors are closing in front of you. And so I really think that that's what has caused a lot of the trajectory in my career, in my personal life. Um, just that I try to say yes as much as possible, and almost despite what the perceived risks might be.
Speechless. So authentic and definitely don't say no to opportunities.
Well,
That
it doesn't always end well, though. I mean,
oh
you
you
know, with high risk can come high reward, but it also means you have far to fall if you fail or you trip. So I've got plenty of battle scars to prove that as well, but I just don't want to live any other way. You know, Even recently in November, I parted ways with Juicer, and I know we're jumping ahead a little bit, but at that moment, I had this crossroads where I had a lot of people in my life telling me, why don't you just go find a stable job with a nice company and, get a good paycheck. You don't have to make all the decisions. You don't have to worry about the risk of it. And, I really considered it. But then I had so many other people saying, what are you talking about? This is you. I mean, how could you possibly consider that? This is who you are. This is what drives you. This is the Ashwin we know, right? Going back to the perception. And it made me realize, like, yeah, they're right. I mean, I don't think I would be happy uh, in a normal job situation. I mean, there could be exceptions, right? If it's building something within a company or whatever, but it really pushed me to pursue my own project again.
Proj- sorry, projects are have come to life, and that I don't know if you will call them a success, but I see them as a success. So I really want to get now into, this part of you. You founded companies, AI powered agents, hospitality. You just mentioned, I want you to take us into the journey,
Sure.
but I have one question for you, Ashwin. How does these ideas come to life, and how is that makes you approach even different companies, different projects?
Okay. So why don't I take you through a bit of the path of how all this happened, and I'll incorporate the answer to your question, in the story. So at Melia, I had the luxury and the fortune of learning all about e-commerce in the hotel industry just when it was getting started. It was really the attacks of September 11th that caused e-commerce to blossom within the hotel industry, and I was there right when it happened. So I had to learn along with everybody else how it works and what the difficulties are and the challenges and how to, from a hotel company perspective, how to work with third parties like Expedia and Orbitz and Travelocity, but to be aware that they're expensive distribution channels, and how to spend money there on marketing and make sure we're getting a good return on investment. But then also, how do we get the consumer to book directly with us so we know the customer? Um, we have to have a good booking experience, a user experience. How do we use our loyalty program for that? Our call center. So I got to learn all about these things. And then what happened was I realized toward the end of 2000, I think it was 8, that there were many other hotel companies out there that also wanted to achieve these goals, but only the really big ones had the budget and the people to invest in the technology to make that happen. And then in early 2010, when I was looking out in the market and seeing the different tools that were out there and available, they were pretty mediocre. And so I knew these developers in Argentina, luckily, because of my Spanish, I was able to work with them. And we came to an agreement that they would help me build a new version of a hotel reservation system. And the agreement was, hey, look, let's share the equity in the company. Whatever revenue we get in year one, I'll just give it all to you. And if you can help me build a system, I'll go out in Miami and see if I can get somebody to use it. And so we did that, and it took about 3 months. And the first time I went in my car, I went around Miami knocking on the doors of all these hotels in Miami, and everybody slammed the door in my face. Because when you go to people with a new technology, the first question is, well, who else is using it? Show me examples of other people that are using it, and then maybe I'll consider it. But I didn't have any customer. So I kind of decided to lower my standards a little bit. And in Miami, I don't know if you're familiar with Miami, but I went to Biscayne Boulevard. And, back in 2010, if you were to drive from, I don't know, 30th Street up to 79th Street on Biscayne Boulevard, wasn't really like a place you want to hang out. It was rundown motels, basically renting rooms out to people on the street. Now, I found one called Motel Bianco. The owner was Venezolano, he was Venezuelan, And I walked in, introduced myself, and the place was beautiful. And he had apparently gotten a grant from the city to renovate it and, make it look like a retro 50s type thing. And I asked him, this place looks wonderful. Why are you taking this business from the street? And he said, well, that's the neighborhood. I just don't know how to do it any differently. And I said, okay, we're going to change this business. If you just trust me, I'm going to build you a website. Let's get professional photos. I'm going to call up Expedia and Orbitz and get you on those websites. But you have to promise me no more street business because all it takes is one of those customers to mix with your current clientele and put a bad review on TripAdvisor, and this whole thing goes up in smoke. So just stick with me and let's make this happen. And he did. So within a few weeks, we were doubling the price of his rooms. He was booked out solid weeks in advance. And he was calling me every day, like, oh my gosh, this is great. And so I was able to then use that and as a case study and go get more and more and more hotels to sign with me. Um, I went down to the Caribbean. I got all these hotels in Barbados and St. Lucia and Antigua, and it was fantastic. The business just started to really take off. Eventually, I realized that I could work with the official tourism destinations in each location. So when I was down in Barbados speaking with hotels, I luckily met somebody connected with the hotel association, and that's a whole other long story that which was a lot of fun. But they hired us to come in and build an engine that would allow somebody to go to visitbarbados.org and book all the hotels in Barbados. So we did that. And again, we were using an official website of the destination and sending these reservations directly to the hotels. And it was one of the only ways that they could get direct reservations besides spending their own marketing dollars on, advertising in Google. So very cool experience. In 2016, we were approached about an acquisition, and it was a Canadian company that was in the loyalty business. They were really excited that we had all these hotels all over Mexico and the Caribbean, and also working with these big destinations around. We had Visit Seattle and Daytona Beach, and so we sold the business in 2016, and it was amazing. And then I ended up working for the company that acquired us for about 5 years, and then I get this phone call. Because I knew after about 5 years I should do something else. And so I started to put content on LinkedIn. I wasn't quite sure how I could find a new job or start a new business. And I saw the COO of LinkedIn post this video. He was walking around his neighborhood in front of his house and he just talked into the phone. And I thought, that is so cool. Like, I love that format. I really think I could do it too. I lived in Rome at the time. And so I started putting these videos out on LinkedIn, and people started reaching out to me like, these videos are so great, you gotta keep doing it. And because of those videos, I got this phone call, and it was somebody who had an idea for using data in restaurants. And so that's how Juicer came to be. And I came in and I built the company, the brand, the customer base, the product, and it was so much fun. And that's how I really got heavily into the restaurant business. So that's kind of the path of, how I got up until November and then, decided to start high margin.
Love it. You're making me dream high here.
Everyone should dream high.
You have led executive roles in a way, right? To build these companies from scratch. What's one leadership lesson that continues to guide you today, Ashwin?
The one leadership lesson that has really guided me and that I'm striving to lead with even now is to be as generous as possible. And that means with customers and employees, the team, shareholders. I really try to live by that principle. And I failed sometimes. To be totally honest, there are moments where I have failed to do that, and I've seen the consequences of of deviating from that mantra or that philosophy. Um, but I have found over the years that that philosophy, that method of doing business builds trust. Um, it and it's like paying it forward, and it comes back, 10 times in the way people think about you, the way people think about the company, the staff, the way they think about each other, how you get business referred to you because of that. Um, yeah, that's been my number one important method, I think.
And let's talk about these methods in hectic times, because I'm sure there have been difficulties along the way.
That's right. In April a year ago, we at Juicer we raised quite a large seed round, which was a moment to celebrate for all of us. And at that time, the goal was to build a pricing solution in the restaurant space. Um, but then around the same time, there was a big scandal around Wendy's when they publicly stated that they were going to be implementing dynamic pricing. And what happened was in the restaurant industry, there was a lot of fear among the restaurants about exploring a new, method of pricing. And so, you know, I wanted to be a very responsible CEO. This was the first time in my life I had ever raised that kind of money, and I was dealing with VCs. And so I decided, well, rather than just waiting and seeing if the market turns, let's be proactive and we need to really cut costs and, ensure the survival of this company because so many people had put in their hard-earned money. But it was one of the most difficult times in my life because I was faced with the decision of letting people go in the company that had trusted me to come work for this company at an early stage. Many of them had invested a lot of their time and energy to get us to where we were. Um, and at the moment, it felt to me like I was doing the right thing. I felt like, okay, this is where I have to grow up and be the CEO of a VC backed company with millions of dollars in the bank. And I can't put my personal feelings in front of what's best for the company. And I made some really difficult decisions and had to let some really good people go. And I lost friends over it. And to this day, I think some of those people, were probably shocked by my decision. And thinking back on it, um, I don't know. It's easy now to sit here and say, well, maybe we could have done things differently, or maybe there was a different path. But this is one of the challenges of raising money on a larger scale and having VCs in the mix because, you can't just say, well, just trust me. We'll figure it out. I mean, I don't want to let these people go. We'll go after a new line of business and it's going to take a few months, but, you know, and so learning from that, when I started High Margin, I vowed that I was not going to raise venture capital. And so, to date, we have taken a little bit of angel investment. I've been very transparent with everybody about the way I want to build this business, which is organically. The goal is not to get just enough so we can go out and raise millions and then find ourselves again under the pressure of like, okay, well, here are the millions, but now we need to see this growth within this timeline. And if we're not seeing that, then heads are going to roll, right? That's just, I've learned through all the different experiences I've had over the last, you know, almost 15 years now of entrepreneurship, that is not the kind of company I want to be running. So I have definitely made mistakes, but I've learned from those. And it kind of just validates for me that the way I had done it all along was the right way.
Yeah, our decisions sometimes have to be taken. And that's a way of learning. Now you learn from that and you're applying it differently.
That's
Um,
right.
let's move away a little bit from this topic because I really want to talk about the unicorn van.
Okay.
What inspired you to take that trip with your daughter? And what did you discover about yourself during that journey?
So one of the things that we did really well at Juicer was to build a network within the restaurant industry. And I built a lot of friendships and personal relationships with not only restaurant executives at all the different conferences I attended, but also the other technology community, the founders of those other companies. But I also found that there were so many other restaurant companies in the United States and franchise owners that I never had an opportunity to speak with. And so the first thing I wanted to solve was, how do I get in front of those people? Now, I could certainly call them up and explain who I am and try to get them on the phone or try to get them to agree to a meeting, or even worse, hire a bunch of, you know, people in a call center to call and call. And I mean, again, that's not the kind of company I wanted. So I thought, what could I do that's different? How could I get in front of these people and get them to agree to see me at their offices? Um, so that was one of the things I wanted to solve. Then, Juicer, at Juicer, we created quite a different brand. We were very transparent, outspoken. I think we approach things quite differently than other companies were. And so, that, and then my daughter, this is my younger daughter, who was 12 at the time. Kids these days, I think, have a harder time finding the inspiration that we used to have when we were kids. And that's because their whole life is on a screen, basically. So they're going to school and then they come home from school, and now we have limitations on the screen time, but it's so addictive that even when that limit kicks in, they're thinking about, when can I get back on that phone, you know? And that troubled me. I also thought back to my experience in Tenerife when I went and studied abroad, and how that opened my world and my opened my eyes about what the world really had to offer and everything that was available beyond the little bubble that I lived in. And so I thought to myself, you know what? If I need to go around the United States and I need to meet with people in person, I could fly around. That's probably not the best way to do it. I could get in a car. And I said to my daughter, hey, would you be interested in coming with me for a couple of months to travel all around the United States? And I spoke to my wife about it. And then the idea of doing it in an RV came up. And then, I don't know, you probably don't know this, but we, for the last 10 years, have had this Hello Kitty car. So we have a Toyota Prius V, but it's wrapped in pink with white polka dots, and it has Hello Kitty stuff all over it. And I will tell you that that car, it's unbelievable the joy that it brings to people everywhere we go. We've driven that car all through the United States, all through Europe. Uh, just 2 weeks ago, we drove it down to Istanbul in Turkey, and the way people react to it, I mean, of course, you have a couple of people that are like, "What is that all about?" But then most people, especially younger people, jump up and down and point and scream and smile. People take pictures of it on the highway, which can be sometimes a little bit dangerous, but it gets so much attention. And so I thought to myself, okay, if my daughter and I are going to be driving around the United States in an RV for 4 months, we got to do this right. And so we decided, okay, well, let's wrap it in polka dots. Instead of Hello Kitty, let's put a big unicorn on it. Everybody knows what that means. And that's how the whole idea came together. And we mapped out a whole itinerary, and we just went.
How nice. How nice. What did your daughter teach you during your cross-country van adventure that surprised you the most?
Well, I think what I loved the most about it and what she taught me was that kids are amazing when you put them in almost any different circumstances or situations. And Taj in particular is a sponge and she absorbs and she adapts. And it was amazing to watch her walk into a boardroom and sit in a room with executives and take notes. And after the meeting, she would have her own comments. Every once in a while, we could walk out of a meeting. She's like, "Oh, well, they sounded really excited, right?" Or sometimes we'd walk out of a meeting and she said, "Well, that didn't go well." So it was really interesting to hear, okay, Todd, so why don't you think that went well? What was the body language? What was their reaction? Uh, why do you think it didn't go well? And it was amazing to hear her perceptions of different people and watch it from that perspective. And then the other thing, as you know, Maria, is that aside from going into these meetings with me, she came to conferences and she got to, and the conferences were so nice about it. And they gave her her own badge and she was able to mingle and come to the cocktail receptions. And, I think the learning experience for her was amazing. And so I think I learned a lot about her and who she is and what she's capable of by watching her, from a distance handle all these new experiences that she had never experienced before.
And that I'm sure she will never forget. I'm
I
sure
don't think either of us will.
she grew a lot from it, I'm sure. I really enjoy when I met you at the conference and you mentioned about having your daughter. I had the chance to meet her for a few minutes. And when I saw that, I'm like, how cool. I really want my son to live through this because it just gives them a different perception in life. So nice.
I had a lot of people approach me because I was documenting this and I was publishing all these videos on LinkedIn that we were going to do this and the preparation and leaving home and traveling to the US and getting the RV wrapped. And people, I think because it was so crazy and so different, people really, I think, liked the story and wanted to see, what we were going to do and how it was going. So I would walk into these conferences and all these people, many of whom I had never met before, would come up to me and just say, "Listen, as a parent, as a mom, as a dad, I just want to tell you what you're doing is unbelievable and it's amazing." And some people said, "I wish I could go back in time and do what you're doing with my kids." Or some people said, "When my kid is older, I'm going to do something like that." And it was nice, Business aside, it was really nice to hear people that got some inspiration from the idea.
Absolutely. I'm thinking here that maybe these conferences should think about these activities where you can pay to bring your kid. They can get to join you, but also they get their own training into like business, how to manage your money. I don't know. Let's get creative here.
That would be great. That would
Yeah.
be great. I mean, I did this one post on LinkedIn many years ago where I suggested that we need to create internships for kids, and in fact, I called it kinderships. And the whole idea was I was hoping I could get a bunch of people together and contact uh, Disney and Netflix and Google and companies that kids would find exciting and let kids go there for a couple of days or maybe even a week and just shadow people and just look at what that's like. Because the reason this started was I was having a conversation with one of my kids and I asked them, "Hey, what do you want to do when you get older, when you grow up, career-wise?" And they were just like, they just didn't have any answers. They didn't know. They didn't know. They hadn't really thought about it. And I was talking to them and they didn't seem to have anything that really interested them. And I said, there's some amazing jobs out there. oh yeah, like what? And I said, well, every time you open Netflix, somebody decided that that show or that movie is going to be there. And there's a system that determines that you are going to be shown those options. That's somebody's job. And they were like, "Oh, really? You mean like I could go work for Netflix and decide that they're going to put a show on Netflix?" I was like, that's somebody's job. And they just couldn't believe it, right? So they hadn't really realized. So kind of like the way my heart was in hospitality and I grew up loving hotels. And so I just decided I was going to somehow pursue that. I thought, how could we create a mechanism where kids get exposure to jobs like that, that they're going to say, wow, when I grow up, I'm going to do that thing and really go after it, right? Because when you're in high school, when you're in college even, and you learn accounting, I don't know about you, but I was sitting there like, why do I have to know this? It's just so boring. Like, and I had no way to know that, well, I wish somebody could come back in time and say, listen, later on, you're going to be starting your own businesses. And believe me, you're going to want to be easily, be able to see how much money you have in the bank and how much you're spending every day and, how to do all that. But I didn't know. I didn't know, right? So I think we have to find a way to inspire our kids about what they may want to do in the future, but also why their education along the way is so important.
And abroad, because I love your idea of getting out of that bubble. Ashwin, let's do this together. I'm into this. I love this.
Yeah, I would love to do it. I really think that there's something there.
Well, maybe in the next few years, there is a system where we can really get kids into grow more. I always speak to my son into the opportunities and into do what you love, but find that passion. And it always intrigued me how to, every time we drive in front of the office, he's like, Mom, Papa John's, Papa John's, when are you taking me to your office again? Because he loved the office. So I love
That's
every
great.
in this conversation. I want to ask you how you balance the pressure, because it is a pressure of being a CEO, with being a present father.
That is a daily struggle. But I will tell you this. When I sold the first business in 2016, my wife and I decided that we wanted to raise our kids internationally. My wife is Austrian, and so we sold everything we owned in the United States and we moved to Paris. And so we spent 2 years in Paris. And then COVID happened. We decided we didn't really love Paris, and so we decided to move down to Rome, and we loved it there. It was warm and sunny. It was cheaper. The atmosphere was just better for us. It was a better fit for us. And then 2 years after Rome, we moved up here to Austria. We've been here almost 3 years now. Now the thing is that I've COVID kind of helped because it normalized the idea of people building businesses at home or working from home. Now that's kind of swung back the other way. But I was working at home in France before COVID happened, and it was nice when everybody else kind of started to do that. And so today, nobody asks like, "Oh, do you have an office?" or "Where's your corporate headquarters?" or "What do you mean you work from home?" It's just so normal now. Now, working from home has given me a lot more freedom and flexibility to spend time with my family and my kids, especially in the mornings, because, typically my workday starts um, 1 or 2 p.m. my time, which is 7 to or 8 a.m. Eastern time. So the challenge is, though, my kids have school early in the morning till, let's say 2 o'clock, and then that's when I start working. So that's been a big challenge. Is like our schedules are don't overlap. Um, the other difficult thing about schedule is I have to work quite often late into the night hours because again, 12 a.m. midnight here is only 6 a.m. 6 p.m. in Eastern time or even 3 p.m. Pacific Coast. So I quite often work late into the night and then sleep late, but then my kids wake up at 5:45 to be out the door by 7, and I don't want to miss that. So, you know, sometimes I wake up at 5:45, exhausted, but go down, help make breakfast, sit with them while they're getting ready. Then they're out the door at 7, and then I usually crash back into bed and take a nap because otherwise I would just be a zombie. So look, there are things over the last 7 years, I would say, or even 15 years. I mean, my kids are only 12 and 13, but um, that I did really well, and other things that I did not do well. I mean, I don't know if we should get into this on a podcast, but it's like I feel like the world has changed. The world really has changed um, in terms of gender roles and you know what the role of a father is and the mother, the division of labor in the house. When it comes to the kids, that has really changed. I think a lot in our society, and I think it's not talked about enough, actually. Um, So, building businesses is a huge sacrifice. And, that definitely takes a toll on the equal division of labor in the house. So that's been a difficult thing, that my wife and I have talked a lot about and working through and, something I think a lot about.
Yeah. It's a work in progress in a way.
That's right. That's right.
Ashwin, I'm being cautious of time, and I don't want to miss the opportunity of asking you of that story behind the Spanish language, your love for this language. And I really want to ask you because I know you mentioned the story of going to Tenerife and living with a family, and that gave you really a whole different view. But how has speaking another language shaped your word view?
Well, if you speak another language, you probably know that it's not just a way to communicate. It actually opens a door to show you that other people and other cultures even think very differently. And the language is a representation of that thinking. So, and even within a group of people that speak the same language, people in Argentina think very differently than people in Spain. People in Mexico, all the different countries have their own, and you can't even generalize people within a certain country, obviously. But I took Spanish in high school. I didn't like it. To me, I didn't again, going back to the accounting example I gave earlier. It was just a subject. I didn't really get why should I care? And I didn't do well until I went to Tenerife. And then I realized, oh, if I speak this language, then when I go out with this group of really cool people and we're at a nightclub or we're having dinner around a table, I can be part of the conversation. I can laugh with them. I can learn about them. I'm going to learn. And I learned within a few weeks. I mean, I came back speaking Spanish. And so when I went to university, I knew I wanted to continue that, as I said earlier. And then when I graduated and I went to work for Accenture and then PricewaterhouseCoopers, I kept asking people, "Hey, how do I use my Spanish language? Can you send me to Argentina? Can you send me to Spain? Whatever." And they kept saying, "No, no, no, you're right out of college, and we have offices in all those places where we recruit locally, and so there's no reason for us to send you there unless you have some skill that we can't find locally." So I never found a path to continue using Spanish language in those companies, which is why when I went to Cornell and I started speaking, when I started learning about the hotel industry, I identified Meliá as the company I really wanted to go work for because I was like, okay, they're based in Spain, they have hotels in Mexico, they have, hotels all over Dominican Republic, and I'm going to get to use my Spanish. Boy, I mean, did I get to use my Spanish because, I thought I spoke Spanish when I joined that company. And then the first time I had to kind of defend myself in a boardroom, people were speaking business lingo at a very fast pace. I felt like I didn't know Spanish at all, and I had to really up my game there. But it was great, and I loved every minute of it. And, it was my first year at Meliá officially in 2003 when I went around to the hotels in Mexico to get to know them. And I was in Puerto Vallarta, And the general manager said to me, I think you should go have lunch with my director of sales. And she's now my wife because, she's Austrian, but she speaks Spanish. And she was working in Mexico, as a director of sales in this resort. And she and I went and had lunch and we were speaking Spanish to each other. And it's a long story about how all that happened, but she will tell you that she never would have married somebody that didn't speak Spanish. So, you know, then when I started my own companies after Melia, as I said earlier, because I was able to speak Spanish, I could build this technology in Argentina. It allowed me to go do business in Mexico. Our biggest customer at Regatta Travel Solutions was a large Mexican resort chain. So I can't say enough about the influence that Spanish has had throughout my life and my career. And it still continues to have.
Right, and the opportunities to come. So probably the next episode, because we're missing a lot from you, Ashwin, we'll do it in Spanish.
Perfect. Sounds good.
One last question. What would you like people listening to take away from this episode?
I think that I guess it's cliche to say this, but it's not about the destination, it's really the journey to get there. But I would add to that cliche that the journey is a lot more interesting and exciting if you are open to as many experiences and opportunities as you can be, and if you lead with generosity throughout that journey.
Love it. I loved every second of this episode.
So
Ashwin,
did I. Thank you.
thank you so much again for being here and for opening your story to the world, our I Am Maria podcast. And I am looking forward our conversation in Spanish. La espero.
Igualmente.